Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna
Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Paribrajikacharya Ashtotarasata Shri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Ganga Mai Ki Jai Jamuna Mai Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande Hari Hari Bol. Thank you so much, Saraswati Mataji, for the kirtan. And thank you everyone for being here for Srimad Bhagavatam class with His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami and friends. It is Monday, October 23rd, 2023. And we're reading in third canto, 25th chapter, The Glories of Devotional Service. And last we spoke, we had a long session on a single verse, which was verse 17. So tonight we're starting with verse 18, if my math is correct. And I need to rest my voice for the rest of the day, so I'm hoping that others may be willing to read and comment as you always do. So Hare Krishna, and thank you very much. Maybe if you're able to, Panchatattva Prabhu, you can get us started with our reading.
I'd be happy to. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Jnana Vairagya Yuktena Bhakti Yuktena Chatmana Paripashya Dudasinam Prakritim Cha Hataujasam. Translation. In that position of self-realization, by practice of knowledge and renunciation in devotional service, one sees everything in the right perspective. He becomes indifferent to material existence, and the material influence acts less powerfully upon him. Purport. As the contamination of the germs of a particular disease can influence a weaker person, similarly, the influence of material nature or illusory energy can act on the weaker or conditioned soul, but not on the liberated soul. Self-realization is the position of the liberated state. One understands his constitutional position by knowledge and vairagya, renunciation. Without knowledge, one cannot have realization. The realization that one is the infinitesimal part and parcel of the Supreme Spirit makes him unattached to material conditional life. That is the beginning of devotional service. Unless one is liberated from material contamination, one cannot engage himself in the devotional service of the Lord. In this verse, it's therefore stated, Jnana Vairagya Yuktena. When one is in full knowledge of one's constitutional position and is in the renounced order of life, detached from material attraction, then by pure devotional service, Bhakti Yuktena, he can engage himself as a loving servant of the Lord. Paripashyati means that he can see everything in its right perspective. Then the influence of material nature becomes almost nil. This is also confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Brahmabhuta Prasannatma. When one is self-realized, he becomes happy and free from the influence of material nature. And at that time, he's freed from lamentation and hankering. The Lord states that position as mad bhaktim labate param, the real state of beginning devotional service. Similarly, it is confirmed in the Narada Pancharatra that when the senses are purified, they can then be engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. One who is attached to material contamination cannot be a devotee. Om Jnana Tvananda Shagrahanjana Salakaya Chakshu Umritanjena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. From the beginning of the purport, I'm reminded of this, of current references for this analog of contamination of the germs of a particular disease influencing a weaker person. We went through a recent pandemic, as you know, and persons with what were called comorbidities were more vulnerable, at least apparently, to certain aspects of the epidemic. And like that, if a person is in a weaker position, conditioned, not taking the proper medicine, not taking the proper diet for Krishna consciousness, then he or she is very vulnerable and is subject to the influence of material nature and has a great deal of difficulty practicing Krishna consciousness, even taking to it. So the weaker conditioned soul is in a more difficult position than a liberated soul. Of course, that makes sense. A liberated soul is free from these contaminations. It says at the very end of the purport, one who is attached to material contamination cannot be a devotee. So a liberated soul is free from such attachment, The wonderful thing about devotional service is that by any contact with it whatsoever, even in one's very beginning state, one gets uplifted. I was listening to a talk earlier by Srila Prabhupada where he's describing the deplorable condition of people in Kali Yuga. They're killing their babies, they're killing the cows, the future is very dark, and they can't understand anything. The greatest scientist cannot understand that he's not the body. He apparently has this wealth of knowledge, but it's maya aparita gyan. It's stolen by illusion. And even though he can work his mind in different ways, he can exercise his brain cells to, work this way and that way, he can't understand the most fundamental principles of his existence. So it's deplorable. And what did Prabhupada prescribe for such persons? Chanting Hare Krishna, taking Krishna Prasad, because by those things a person can become purified. Even if they don't particularly take to the philosophy, just by the transcendental influence of Krishna through his holy name and through his presence as Krishna Prasadam, they get some purification and can come to the proper standard. That may take some time, but it's there. The process is there, and that's why Krishna. Therefore, Prabhupada was saying, he was saying Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama. He was on a morning walk. He likes to chant that verse, on morning walks. You'll hear him from time to time. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama Eva Kevalam. Kalo Nasjeva, Nasjeva, Nasjeva. Katiranyata. Anyata, he said, means no other. There's no other way to make advancement in spiritual life in this Kali Yuga than to chant the holy name, chant the holy name, chant the holy name of the Lord. So that's the position. Also says here, the influence of material nature becomes almost nil by pure devotional service, engaging as a loving servant of the Lord. Paripashyati means that he can see everything in its right perspective. Look at the verse. Paripashyati. One sees everything in the right perspective, becomes indifferent to material existence. And what is that position of self-realization? Described in the previous verse. At that time, the soul can see himself to be transcendental to material existence and always self-effulgent, never fragmented. It's self-real. He realizes his position as spirit soul, Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma, and continuing in devotional service, he comes to understand his relationship, his activities, and achieves the supreme destination, the supreme platform of love of Godhead, Abhideya, Sambandha Abhideya Prayojana. That process takes place. Those are my 2 cents worth. Are there any comments, or anyone like to carry on?
There's a few comments in the chat. Ikendra Prabhu says, he becomes indifferent to material existence and the material influence acts less powerfully upon him. Something to look forward to. Srila Prabhupada seems to indicate here that the renounced order of life is to be detached from material attraction, not to be a sannyasi as an external designation. Then the influence of material nature becomes almost null. Also something to look forward to. What a nice side benefit. And Saraswati Mataji and Tulsi Priya Mataji have their hands raised.
She had her hand up first, so.
Go ahead.
Pranams to everyone. So I was just, this word indifferent, of course that means unconcerned, unmoved, but the way it can be misconstrued, because in our course of preaching I've found that the impression that materialists sometimes get is that devotees are indifferent, meaning they're unfeeling, uncaring in some way, or they feel that they're escaping from life, they're becoming withdrawn from mainstream society, or they're checking out of life, and that they should really endeavor to make a difference in this world. I've heard this so many times. And you tell them that trying to escape the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease is real intelligence. Trying to escape that and showing others the escape route is actually making a real difference in their lives as well. Because if the propaganda from mainstream society is just to keep everyone in ignorance about the real perils, and that what the real enemies are, then really mainstream, that propaganda in itself is faulty. The real challenge, I think, also comes from trying to preach to those who are not outright atheists, and they accept the scriptures. And since there's only a small number of participants today, I thought maybe I could share something personal. I'm sure everyone's had to overcome so many obstacles to come to a point when they want to try and get their family to somehow or another come on board or accept their decisions. And similarly in my case, and I found there kind of a running theme here when it came to young Indian girls wanting to join the movement, and we're talking about like maybe the early 80s. Well, in our family, I think I've spoken so much about how my mother was an inspiration to all of us and tried to create a very devotional atmosphere in the family. But really, the problems really came because my father, although he was supporting my mother in how she ran things in the household and brought up her children. He had this unfulfilled dream of his, which was to go to university and get a degree. He himself was exceptionally bright. He could skip 3 or 4 grades, and math, if you tested him in math, it would be off the charts. But due to money, he wasn't able to go to university, so he pushed that on his children, and namely ended up coming on my shoulders. So after I graduated, and it was in fact at university that I met the very first year that I met the devotees and really spent more time with devotees than actually in class. But I did just enough to actually pass, but passed quite well, enough to satisfy my father. At any rate, after I'd finished my education and came home and handed him the little piece of paper that meant so much to him, and it was really just a piece of paper at the end of the day, and then told him that I've decided to move out of home and into the Brahmacharini ashram. He only had a few bits of hair left on his head, and I swear he pulled all of that off. He was that mad that I could decide to do something like that. And of course, then he brought his backup. His entire brothers and all the extended family members came down on me. And their whole argument was, yes, we accept the scriptures, we accept knowledge leads to renunciation. Both of these are needed. Bhakti, no one was opposed to what the scriptures were saying. What their argument was based on was, no, I was far too young to be renouncing life in this kind of manner. And at that time, I just said I didn't want to get married. And they thought, well, that was too much of a renunciation for somebody so young, and to move out of home, that's uncalled for. Unless you're married, you don't leave out of home. Of course, going to university was just a temporary moving out of home. So their whole argument was, no, you need to experience life. You need to go through all the different ashrams in order to come to this point of real renunciation. Right now, it's nothing but premature renunciation. And sure, I was, I still am very much a beginner, but the fact that I had caught on to the real knowledge of our constitutional position, even if I'd somehow failed, it still didn't mean that I should give up on trying to make progress on the path of bhakti. Even if in the end it turned out that I couldn't complete it, still I was not losing anything. But their argument was very similar to that King Daksha's argument, where no, his sons had to have they have to go and experience material happiness and have those desires all fulfilled in order for those desires to then be stamped out, which we know it's not the case. Material desires don't just get stamped out. Just because you experience pain in pursuing one form of material happiness doesn't mean that then you'll say, okay, I give up, I'm never going to try this again. You're going to keep trying and trying without fail, because material desires don't just stamp out on its own. So this was my argument back and forth with them, and I would point out our neighbor next door, an Indian man who'd lost his wife, and now at age 80 he wanted to get married again. He had grandchildren. So I said to my father, well, if going through all the different ashrams would bring you to the point of complete realization, how come, Mr. So-and-so Patel next door at age 80 has remarried? That his experiencing whatever happiness and painful happiness or sad, whatever he experienced, he never got to the point of renunciation. And then I pointed out a couple of female cousins in our family who were so miserable, and I reminded my father that you said not too long ago you'd like to string up her husband high and dry with the way he's behaving. So there's no guarantees, even if you got me married, I could end up miserable. So anyway, in the end, they were so furious. They were not happy. And it was very painful. In fact, that was the first time I ever really went against my parents. It was so painful. I know I cried in the Brahmacharini ashram for so long. It was so painful to have walked out of that house knowing that I had hurt them so much. Not so much my mother, but my father. And it wasn't until it was the mercy of devotees that came to him, because they'd realized that I was really quite sad, even in the Brahmacharini ashram. And some devotees came and they talked to my father, and it took some time, but in the end, of course, sadhu sangha, it can never go. It cannot fail. So in the end, he did become a devotee. Anyway, it's a long story, but Haribol.
Any more comments in the chat, Surbi Kunj?
Yes. Ekendra Prabhu said, Srila Prabhupada says, one who is attached to material contamination cannot be a devotee. So, isn't everyone who comes to Krishna consciousness attached to material contamination to some degree? It seems like a question of degree. And what exactly is that degree?
Yeah, Srila Prabhupada would talk about that. Whatever degree we are attached to material contamination or material enjoyment, that is Krishna. He withholds himself. The more we are attached to Krishna, the more he reciprocates. So, yeah, I agree. There's a certain amount of degree. Prabhupada often described the temple. Well, he sometimes described the temples as hospitals. You can't expect everybody to be well at the hospital, but the idea is they've come to take treatment, and provided that they're good patients and they follow the transcendental physician, the spiritual master, they follow the prescription, they can become healed. So Krishna consciousness is like that. And even for the persons who can't fully recognize, as I was mentioning before, they can't even fully recognize that they're in a diseased condition. There's a discreet treatment, hearing the holy name on the streets, receiving Krishna Prasad and tasting Krishna Prasadam, reading some book about Krishna. So, yeah, the material world is full of contamination and full of living entities who are by nature pure spirit souls, but who in effect, in contact with matter, have become conditioned. So Krishna consciousness, our Vaidhi Bhakti is the process of becoming free from those lower modes of nature and fixed in Krishna consciousness gradually. I cannot say that I am free from material contamination. It would be a farce for me to say such things. Any other comments or observations?
Hari.
Ananta Shesh, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Ananta Shesh Prabhu writes, and I bet ISKCON got blamed for it by family, responding to
In reference
Saraswati
to,
Mataji.
yeah.
And Kendra Prabhu says, thank you, Panchatattva Prabhu. Maybe the key to reducing the material fever is the willingness to take the practical steps required to reduce that fever.
Yeah, that's right. Be a good patient. That's another thing Prabhu was talking about. That he was talking about the Mayavadis. They're in a disease condition, but they think that the solution is to destroy the source of what they think is a disease, this body, destroy consciousness, destroy everything, because their idea is that their presence in the material world is a source of suffering, period, and that there's no recourse except to impersonalism or voidism. But a devotee's position is much happier, because even as a patient, that person who's taking seriously the process of Krishna consciousness can be engaged in service via the spiritual master to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He can prepare and offer food for the Lord. He can engage in hearing and chanting the holy names. He can hear from bona fide authorities and follow their instructions and become purified gradually. He doesn't have to resort to the ultimate act of frustration, which is a kind of spiritual suicide. Mother Tulsi Priya, I think you were going to make a comment.
I'll read my husband's comment since he's tagging from your comment. He says Ravindra Sri Prabhu would say that stubborn attachment to material contamination means to have, quote, non-negotiable material desires.
Yeah.
So
we have to guard against that. I'll surrender this much, but no more.
Yeah, because it's, as long as you have a material body, it's somewhat natural to have some material desires, but when you cling to them, that's when you have, or, cling to them beyond what is normal. If you're hungry, you're going to stay hungry until you eat. But if if you become a glutton or you develop a food addiction, then that's something that is a real interference in your spiritual life. But anyways, my comment was kind of a combination of a question and a comment. In this verse and purport, the word influence is mentioned 5 times. And I was thinking, well, what is the nature of the material influence? You mentioned COVID, and COVID has a lot of effects. It influences the body in many, many ways that we don't even realize fully. And in the same way, the material energy also influences us. But I was thinking, well, I'm still in a material body, and I know I'm under the influence of material nature. And I'm certainly not going to claim to be a devotee. At best, I feel like I've become favorable towards the idea of devotional service. and I, by nature, even as a child, I was a little bit philosophical, and I've become more philosophical. But I feel like so what is the nature of the influence of material energy on me? It's like I still have to die. I still have to grow old. Well, I'm already old. I still have, I took birth. I wasn't trying to be a devotee when I took birth, but so I'm thinking, I can only take it that the real influence of Krishna consciousness is on consciousness. And so whatever the material energy is throwing at us, it doesn't in the liberated state, in the pure devotee state, you're not becoming psychologically or in your consciousness imprinted by the material energy. Stuff is happening, old age, sickness, death, it happens, but it doesn't make its mark on you the same way. And not only those things, but all kinds of things. Devotees have money problems. They their spouses leave them, so many things happen. So I think sometimes devotees think, at least neophytes think, oh, the material energy, I'm not under the effect, means things are going to be smooth sailing, and we're not going to have problems. But I don't think that's what's being talked about here in terms of the material influence. I think it's the desire to enjoy, the desire to remain separate, the desire to try to be the Lord and Master. So that, that influence is one of consciousness, and the remedy is also on the consciousness. I don't know, you have any, am I seeing it rightly, or do you have something you could correct or add to it?
I agree with you. I was listening to a talk that Jayadvaita Swami was giving, where he was being asked about his new book, Kirtan Standards, and he was explaining different things about it, how he didn't want it to be a, like a heavy set of rules or something, and people had to be afraid of how they chant and stuff, because there's also the bhav, the feeling. But anyway, he went on to, and there were a lot of questions, and he quoted Ravindra Swarup Prabhu and said, in relationship to some topic I can't remember, but he was talking about the 4 regulative principles and how they're actually, we refer to them as like regulated principles of freedom, and how they affect us. We think of them as restraints from sinful activities, but actually they're all about cognition, consciousness, as you were referring to. They're all about freeing our consciousness from its reduced condition due to its strict control by the modes of nature, to a liberated consciousness, remembering Krishna, ultimately remembering our relationship and our activities with Krishna and so forth. So those are like the beginning steps. First, you have to stop focusing your consciousness and your desires on these lower things and bring them up. And that's a good starting point. The other thing is, I was thinking about this purport in relationship to verses that Srila Prabhupada often quoted from 2nd chapter of the 1st canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, Divinity and Divine Service. And he's got, I won't recite them all, but He talks about Shukadev Goswami, I believe, talks about by regular attendance in classes on Bhagavatam, rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. And then he says, I can get to, and I'm trying to do all of this stuff on a Kindle. Then he says, as soon as irrevocable loving service is established in the heart, the effect of nature's modes of passionate ignorance, such as lust, desire, and hankering, disappear from the heart. Then the devotee is established in goodness and he becomes completely happy. And it goes on like that. Thus established in the mode of unalloyed goodness, the man whose mind has been enlivened by contact with devotional service to the Lord gains positive scientific knowledge of the personality of Godhead in the stage of liberation from all material association. So there's this process, you know, there's a things happen after another. There's a path that's expanded on by the acharyas, that's delineated by the acharyas in various books. Things to watch out for, things to be careful about in our spiritual lives. How to examine our consciousness for the effects of passion and ignorance. How to examine our consciousness for the subtler effects, such as profit, adoration, and distinction, and so forth. So all those things are there. We've got the roadmaps provided by the acharyas. We have the spiritual master who will sometimes personally examine our service and activities and so forth, and who will answer our questions and help eliminate our doubts as we go on this path of Krishna consciousness. I had a real senior devotee once say to me, I mean, I've listened to this devotee for years, give the most amazing Bhagavatam classes. And he said, I'm really trying to work on getting rid of this desire for adoration and distinction. You know, he's talking about himself quite honestly, saying that's still there and I'm trying to get at it. So, you know, honest assessments will, if we're honest, just like that previous verse in that second chapter, Shrinvatam Swakata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Rijanta Stoya Badrani Vidunoti Sritsatam, that the Supreme Lord is in our hearts and he's the benefactor of the truthful devotee. We have to be trying really hard to be truthful with our current condition. You know, it's like if you go to a doctor and you're unwilling to describe all your symptoms, you know, what kind of of course, in Krishna consciousness, the spiritual master he or she is going to see right through. He's going to see your symptoms. But if you're compliant, the first thing you do is, this is where I'm at. You're honest with yourself and you're honest with your physician. So that's called on. That's called for with a respectful surrender and so forth. I think that's part of the key to self-examination. You take help from the right personalities, and then you get the proper prescription, and you can be on your way to perfect spiritual health. Sorry, I wandered there.
Thank you. There's something to be said for just ordinary dealings with devotees who are our peers, or, you know, they may be senior to us, but they're not specifically authorities.
Yeah.
You know, I for myself, either devotees have either told me right to my face what's wrong with me, or I see something wrong with them, and then I learn, okay, I don't have, you know, the tolerance, or I don't have the vision to see their, you know, better qualities, or what I don't like about them is probably what's wrong with me as well. And those things, you know, over the course of, you know, everyday interactions with people, you can learn a lot about yourself if you're open to it. It might take a while. It might take getting hit over the head a couple of times. But I find it invaluable. I find it invaluable because, you know, and there have been some interactions I've had where the person has said something to me and hate might be too strong a word, but I would have to force myself to not think about the person so I wouldn't wish anything bad happened to them. And then years later, I'm like, son of a gun, they were right.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah, I have similar experiences for sure. I had to anyway, talk about myself. But anyway, sometimes you have devotees who will just stand you up and say, they'll what's the expression? They'll dress you down. They'll,
yeah.
they'll tell you, listen, you know, I had a devotee tell me once, I was a very new devotee, and gushing with enthusiasm. I was in that period of devotion that a lot of devotees have this experience with their initial period of Krishna consciousness coming and living in the temple and realizing that you're living with a bunch of demigods who are like the most extraordinary personalities you've ever met, only later to find out they got problems like you too. But anyway, he just took me aside and said, you are a fake devotee. You're a pseudo devotee. You're a fake. You're not real. You know, you got to straighten up, you know. And I didn't know what he was talking about. Later on, I thought, actually, he was trying to do me a favor. He was trying to get me to enter that phase of really intense self-examination, which you have to do. If you want to make advancement, you really have to look inside and say, okay, I've got to deal with this. I've got to deal with that. You know, my false ego flares, my attachments don't always subside. They're there. You have to actually do the work. You have to do the work. So yeah, I've been called out a few times. Anybody else? I didn't mean to start chairing the meeting, but
There's
There's a few comments in the chat box. Ananda Shesh Prabhu said, in pharmacy school, we were given placebos with a timer to take it 4 times a day. Most of us failed. The point being, how can you advise patients to be compliant? And Ekendra Prabhu says to Ananda Shesh Prabhu, one might take the position with patients that if you can't be compliant, you can't be complainant.
well, that compliance is helped by association. And that's where Mother Tulsi Priya's prescription of friends and peers in Krishna consciousness is very important. We have to have daily association one way or another with devotees who are on the path and who are somewhere in the range of our experience as devotees. And you know, and that way there's a kind of, especially if they're sincere, there's encouragement. And sometimes they'll say, hey, how are you doing? What's going on? Everything good today? You look kind of down. What's the deal? Sometimes devotees will help each other in that way. We're not impersonalists. Of course, the age of this recent phenomenon of COVID kind of made us, you know, devotee shut-ins for a while. And those of us who were marking the time must have realized to one degree or another how hard that is. You know, it's very difficult to not have regular association of devotees and at the same time make perceptible, recognizable spiritual advancement. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada established the International Society for Krishna Consciousness to give association and to give a chance for practical devotional service. And I would say he did it so that he would have association of devotees as he traveled all over the world. I think he relished the association of his sons and daughters.
Yeah. He did. He loved them. He was a real father. I remember one time. Sorry, go ahead. You go ahead.
Sorry. He said this, that his spiritual master had sent them. You know? quite remarkable. Sometimes he would speak humbly like that. I just think, oh my goodness. Go ahead, Mataji.
I forgot.
He said he had his family, early in life, and then he took sannyas, and now and then he got a worldwide family. His family actually expanded. So.
Oh, I remembered what I was going to say. I was at a disciples meeting with my spiritual master, and I had maybe for like 2 years prior to that meeting, I had been living with devotees, living in temples and having a lot of devotee association. And then I got married and I decided I was going to live near my mother, which wasn't really very close to any temples, unless I wanted to drive an hour. So it wasn't daily association anymore. And prior to that point of moving away, I had started getting a bad attitude, like being upset with devotees, and feeling ill-used in certain respects by people that I thought were my friends. And then after I had been living away from them for a while, and I went to this disciples meeting, I remember somebody, he was asking for questions, but people were writing these questions on pieces of paper and choosing them. And somebody had written the question, how do you develop more appreciation and better relationships with devotees? And the first thought that came up in my mind is, stay away from them for a while and you will learn to appreciate them. And of course, I don't recommend that, but it was like I didn't have the proper appreciation, which was why I was getting upset with devotees. And then after I had been away from them for a while, I was really feeling the separation. And it gave me a totally different mentality about it. So devotees should be careful what they wish for. If they get if they develop a bad attitude and then they're removed from that association, they may feel it. Although if a person is offensive, this is my personal theory, it might be confirmed by Shastra, I don't know. But I feel like when somebody is offensive, Krishna will take them away from the devotee association, but he'll let them think it's their own idea. Because if you're taken away and it's not your idea, you might feel like, oh, I miss the devotees. But you can't really be kicked out of devotee association unless that's what you want and you think it's your idea. So
yeah, that's an observable phenomenon.
Yeah. They think they're leaving, but really what it is, they're getting kicked out.
Yeah.
Shall we move on to the next?
Yeah.
Oh,
shall we go to the next verse? Go ahead. Would you like to read, Monty?
I think there's just 2 comments left.
Oh, this time?
Yeah. Ekendra Prabhu says, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, in his commentary on this verse, says about the jiva in his healthy condition. He sees his own ignorance, which is unable to do anything to him. And Saraswati Mataji says, so much efforts are made in Sankirtan to attract others to bhakti, but sometimes after those individuals join the movement, they are then treated poorly and unfairly, so they leave, which defeats the objective.
Yeah, we should be careful to treat everyone who comes to Krishna consciousness with a great deal of empathy and kindness. Sometimes we fall short, but you have to be patient. There's a letter from Prabhupada to someone along these lines saying, if you're in you can't expect, it's a letter or a portion of a letter that's commonly circulated on social media. Certain things from Prabhupada become very popular in their circulation because they address issues that we deal with, like this one. And said, you can't expect everybody to be first class, basically is what he's saying. You can't expect, because all different kinds of people are coming to Krishna consciousness. very, very high class, not so high class, all the people in different modes, they're coming. And their gradual improvement will take place, and sometimes very quick improvement, but you can't expect everybody to be the same. You can't expect there won't be friction. But his conclusion was, we have to tolerate. Don't abandon the ship of Krishna consciousness. Stay on board for the voyage and you'll achieve the goal. It's like that in any institution, but this institution, the Hare Krishna movement, it actually has the highest goal. It's something you want to stick with as far as a sangha, an association of devotees, and guidance from advanced, realized souls, so that you can make real progress in your spiritual life. It's no ordinary voyage. It's a voyage back home, back to Godhead. So you have to be a little tolerant, because not everybody's the same. It's that way in any organization, mundane or transcendental. You're going to run into these types of things. You have to be a little patient and tolerant. Unfortunately, sometimes we can fall into the rut of seeing more faults in others than in ourselves. We lose our introspection for, I don't know, what would you call it? Extrospection, looking at everyone else and judging them, and there's a subtle thing about it too, because if another person is found to be faulty, you can rather comfortably in the lower modes of nature stop looking at yourself and say, well, what about this person? What about that person? You may even have the same faults, but because you're making that person, you're trying to push that person down in terms of, his Krishna consciousness or her Krishna consciousness, because they have this problem and that problem. And there's a kind of subtle satisfaction where I'm better than that person because they have so many flaws. That's not Krishna conscious. That's nothing resembling Trinadapi Sunichena Tororiva Sahishnuna. It doesn't resemble it in the slightest. So we have to be careful. So there are people like that do that in association of devotees, who are devotees themselves, but are, essentially on the Kanishta platform, where they can't recognize the glories of other devotees. So there's that too. And again, I rambled on. I'm sorry about that.
Tulsi Priya Mataji says in the chat box, suppose you're on the ship. You do not find just all men to your choice. There may be different kinds of men. But what is that to you? You have to cross the Atlantic Ocean. Patiently cross. Just sit down tightly on the ship and take advantage of the opportunity. That is your business.
It's a quote from Srila Prabhupada?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, nice. There it is.
And Ananta Shesh Prabhu says, intolerance is our biggest enemy. Have to realize that there is a devotee spectrum.
That's right. Well said. There's a spectrum, where just like in a hospital, you've got different wards, You have the mental ward, you have the physical ward, you have the physical and mental ward, you have the tamagun ward, the mode of passion, rajagun, and the sattvagun ward. You have different places with patients who require different kinds of specialized treatment, and the spiritual master and advanced devotees know how to apply those treatments effectively. And the holy name itself, or himself, I should say, effectively applies that treatment.
Prabhu?
Krishna. Yes.
I was just thinking when I was talking about, I was saying I was feeling ill-treated, and I was thinking, I think this might apply in a broad way, but usually when we're feeling ill-treated, we often develop a defensive, offensive mentality. We think we're better, even though we may not be mistreating them. So if we feel we're being mistreated, it's like we start thinking, I'm better than this person. Oh, they're supposed to be a devotee and they're so this and that and the other thing. And it seems that, I don't want to say that, yeah, if you're actually getting abused, you should just take it, but it seems that there are ways to defend yourself and protect yourself from somebody who's actually mistreating you in a serious way, as opposed to, let's say, the normal, ordinary conflicts of personalities that we have in every temple and every ashram. People just rub up against each other in irritating ways, and we develop an attitude. And so if you start thinking, oh, I'm better than them, you may be the one that's getting mistreated, but if you develop the bad consciousness, then you're the one who's wrong, because somebody just being irritating or a little mean or insulting or having acting like they're superior, that's their problem. But my problem is, how am I looking at the devotees? How am I thinking of myself in relation to the devotees? And so you may go away because you think you're better than that. But it seems like there has to be a way that if you don't get along or if you're being ill-treated, that you can defend yourself or protect yourself while still remaining humble and not developing an offensive mentality, even if it is in the mood of self-defense, because I don't think it really matters if you're defending yourself. The point is your consciousness has to be pure. You have to be, what's the point of being humble if you're only humble when people are nice to you? That's not humility. So I think, we should take responsibility if we mistreat others and they go away. But the fact remains is, if somebody thinks I'm too good for these people, and they haven't internalized the philosophy enough to say, okay, I'm suffering, I'm not getting along with them. How do, but I believe in the philosophy, I believe in this process, so I'm going to stick with it, because there's really not an excuse to not stick with the process, even if you don't always like the people. So I don't know. It's just a thought, we can blame ourselves for not treating others well, but it's everyone's own responsibility to stay in Krishna consciousness, no matter what, if that's what they really want.
Right. Yeah. I think Mother Saraswati had a comment, didn't she? Surabhi Kunj?
Yes. Saraswati Mataji says, no patient will go untreated on path of bhakti. Just follow the treatment plan sincerely without duplicity.
Yeah. I mean, if there's some serious mistreatment among devotees, there are different ways to deal with it. I think Jayadvaita Swami was talking about this to some degree in that talk that I was hearing earlier. I posted it on my Facebook page in case anybody wants to see it. He was saying, you can, depending upon the situation, you can address the person with kindness and respect and say, there seems to be some problem here. Is there something we can do about it? Or you can, if it's an older devotee, then you can, bring the matter up with proper discretion and respect to some senior Vaishnava to see what can be done, someone maybe in temple authority or so forth. So it's not like nothing should be done about serious mistreatments in devotee sangha, but it does require a certain amount of humility and discretion, and we have examples. That's the thing about Prabhupada's books. There are examples throughout of humble devotees accepting curses and unwilling to do anything about it because they're just so humble. Devotees being attacked. The Supreme Personality of God himself, Lord Nityananda, is attacked by Jagai and Madhya. Well, not by both of them, one of them through the, but he was only and he remained wishing only for their spiritual welfare. Jud Bharat, who didn't even, he was dragged into a temple of Kali and presented as a human offering, as a human sacrifice, and he didn't resist. He was, put to work by the men of Maharaj Rahugana, and he didn't even speak up until he was questioned by Maharaj Rahugana, and there was an opportunity to reply with transcendental knowledge. But he was, being badly treated and criticized and insulted, and he never took revenge. He certainly had full power to do so. So that's the other thing. If you read Prabhupada's books every day and you hear from the spiritual master, it also helps to ease the way through the everyday difficulties of life. And you get the association of these great personalities through Prabhupada's books and through the mouth of the spiritual master and through Prabhupada's recorded words and so forth, and it becomes a lot easier. And you actually make spiritual advancements.
Saraswati Mataji says, Jayadvaita Maharaj said when a devotee in Houston did so much service and left, Srila Prabhupada was so upset when he heard this and didn't want to hear that devotee's faults at all and said, bring the devotee back. And Tulsi Priya Mataji posted the link of the talk that you're referring to, Panchatattva Prabhu.
Oh, great. Thank you. Yeah, it's a very nice talk. You may have to turn up the volume. Maharaj's voice is still relatively weak, but it's a great talk.
I just wanted to maybe correct myself. I don't think my point in what I was saying is not that we should say that a person who leaves because they're mistreated is insincere. It may or may not be the case. I mean, there are some egregious treatment of people that would, you would be insane to not go away, but I guess what I mean is we all have to take responsibility for our part in a situation, and if we want Krishna consciousness, we'll keep at it and we'll find a way no matter what. But, and we have to take responsibility for it ourselves when we leave, but the people who are mistreating those who leave, we also have to take responsibility for that.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. I'll tell a story. My wife will be really angry with me about it, but maybe she won't be. When she was a very new devotee, and she was anyway. It was in ISKCON Brooklyn, and there was a person in charge of the Brahmacharini ashram who had just decided that young Yovanananda was just not a person she liked at all and was really giving her a hard time. So finally got to the point where Yovanananda, who may have been at that name, it may not even been initiated at that time, although I think she was. Maybe she wasn't initiated yet. She just gave up and went home to her sisters. Her mother had passed away when she was only 1 year old, so she was living with her sisters in the Bronx at that time. So she left the ashram and she went home, and then a day or two later, she heard some commotion outside of her sister's flat, and there was a carload full of devotee ladies from the temple. And they were saying, Yovi, come on, what are you doing? Let's go back to the temple, come on. And she immediately grabbed all her things and went back to the temple because those devotees were kind to her and wanted her back and went to the trouble to go and find her. So that personal affection is needed amongst devotees. It's a tall order to try to stand up to the material energy, especially in the beginning of your spiritual life. it's no easy task. Therefore, Prabhupada said we shed gallons of blood to to bring someone to Krishna consciousness, because it's not easy for them to come, and it's hard work for the devotees to bring them sometimes. But once they come and they get on board, and they make some advancement, and the devotees are kind to them and encouraging, oh, that's very nice. So, yeah, we should be in that mood towards each other. There's that famous story of Jayadvaita Swami in Australia, had done so much service for Srila Prabhupada, but then he had, some falling down and went away. And Prabhupada was very upset with devotees who were criticizing him. He was saying, you're criticizing him, like you're making it impossible for him to come back. He is very upset, because Prabhupada knows the psychology. Everybody has their, a certain amount of pride. You have a pride in existence. You don't like to be maligned. Why would you go back somewhere where people are ridiculing you and thinking you lower than a dog because, you had some temporary difficulty? Anyway, there's more to that story, but that's the point. Prabhupada did not like, Prabhupada understood what it was like for these young men and women to break away from material life for the four regulative principles, for a life of extreme simplicity compared to what they had been accustomed to. Nowadays, we may have our homes and so forth and separate apartments and stuff, but it wasn't like that in those days. You slept on the floor. If you were lucky, a wooden bunk. A lot of devotees can tell stories about eating off of wax paper. Going out in cold blizzards, distributing books and then various types of things to bring some Lakshmi home to the temple, to keep the lights on, taking cold showers because the furnace wasn't heating. Everybody's got stories. And those devotees, they stayed, and they made amazing advancement in Krishna consciousness. Another way to deal with it is to see these things as Krishna's test. Krishna's testing our sincerity sometimes. I think we went way over time. I think it's like way after 8 o'clock, and I apologize for all the rambling I did. I shouldn't do it. It'd be nice to go through like 4, 5, 6 verses every time. And, I apologize for making that mistake.
I didn't feel like you need to apologize. I was appreciating.
I do. I feel like I need to. Will someone lead the kirtan? The closing kirtan?
Saraswati says, thank you for the nice satsang. And my husband says, I like the slow going deep dives. I do too. Hare
Krishna. I just like getting this association of devotees while on the road traveling. It's like a lifesaver for me.
Bhaktin Dana says, I love what you have to say. I love your rambles. Ha.
You are too kind, Bhaktin Dana.
And she says they are full of such nectar.
Hare Krishna.
And I think since you're on a roll, you should lead the closing kirtan.
Come on, there must be someone else out there. Who's out there?
I'm just trying to move things along so we're not that much later by asking you since you're already on the mic.
Surabhi Kunj, you never lead kirtan. Why don't you lead?
No, I'm not much of a kirtan leader.
That's all right. I'm not much of one either. All right, Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Privrajagacharya Astotra Satta Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Privrajagacharya Astotra Satta Shri Srimad, His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Brinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Brinda Ki Jai. Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shyamakund Radhakund Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Maya Ki Jai. Jamuna Maya Ki Jai. Shrimati Tulasi Devi Ki Jai. Shrimati Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhakta Brinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Gaur Premanande. Haribol.
Jai. I was having trouble unmuting myself. I had too many windows open. All right, Krishna. Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Sure. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, thank you everyone for being here. And Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Jayadvaita Swami and friends Ki Jai.
Jai.
Samaveta Bhakta Brinda Ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.